Hi, Akshay. Good evening. You're joining us from India. So, our first guest joining from India. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it just so happens that I have to be in India when we need to record this. So, but well,
And now I can officially say that I have international guests on my podcast. So, it's,
yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah,
So glad to have you, Akshay. We have many things in common. We both went to CMU. We are both happened to be neighbors, which we found out accidentally. I think since I met you, I was very looking forward to talk to you more. You're working on some very interesting stuff, and you started your career in machine learning. You worked at Apple, and then you were building models for MoveWorks, which is a company of a lot of interest to me lately. And you really saw how AI is deployed in enterprises, not just demos and production. So it's a very, very interesting experience because a lot of people are struggling right now with deploying AI in enterprise situations, right? And now you're founder of Kashikoi.
yeah.
Yes. And you got backed by YC, so congratulations. And you're working on simulating infrastructure to solve verification problem of these AI agents, which is holding enterprise adoption. So which is very, very cool and would love to know more. I'm curious, what made you leave MoveWorks, Kashka? It's like one of the hottest companies and start your startup.
So at MoveWorks, obviously, I got to do great work, and I think as part of that, so when I joined MoveWorks, like ChatGPT came out just 3 months into me joining, so we had to quickly revamp our internal stack, and so I got to like build a lot of new and 0 to 1 new stuff that needed to like handle. If you're transitioning a stack, like you need to do a lot of testing, and so what ended up happening is that I took a lot of initiatives on creating new testing infrastructure for as we were transitioning and upgrading our stack. And when doing this for 3 years, I realized that I think there's a real need in the market for this, where this need needs to be focused on as its own product. And that's when I thought that it would be I wanted to focus on this like 100% of my time. And so a colleague of mine and we both decided to do that. So yeah, that's how I ended up starting up. Yeah.
That's great, Akshay. So I'm curious, what were the specific problems that you were running in where you saw the value of verification systems? And it's funny because as a startup, we barely do QA of our UI. We just want to ship the product as quickly as possible. And now we have this another intelligent, unpredictable layer in our products. So, what did you see in your experience?
Yeah, I think the main sort of gap that I felt was happening in the market, which exists today as well, is that fundamentally the way to build on LLMs is different from the way software is built. Suddenly, everybody has to change the way they work, dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And I'm not just talking about like business uncertainty or, there's like a new revolution. All of that is, of course, that's happening as we speak. But what's like in software, when there's an input, there's an output, and you expect it to happen every single time you give that input. That is basically the exact opposite of what happens in LLMs. Every time you give an input, you will basically get some variation of the output. And this is actually what makes LLMs very powerful, but it's very hard to wrap one's head around. And this is what I was seeing as we were doing a lot of deployments. At least the 2 3 years that have gone by since GPT came out, people, they want the comfort of deterministic automation with the power that comes with model or probabilistic behavior. So everybody wants best of both worlds, but that will require a certain change in the kind of the way things are built and expectations of like what to expect from which part of the stack. That's the gap, yeah, that I saw and I wanted to fill. I think to me that is a symptom of not having good tools. Like everybody, obviously there are lots of subject matter experts, there are lots of people who want to make useful products, make build successful businesses. So how do you bridge this gap between wanting deterministic outputs but also being able to leverage the probabilistic power of LLMs.
Yeah, it's the intelligence that we want with determinism.
Yeah.
I- so so it's interesting. So Akshay, would you give an examples for in an organization, let's say they're using an RPA for a specific thing and they got moveworks and they wanted intelligence and determinism of RPA, and what was the motivation to need that additional intelligence and move to an LLM based agent?
At least in the early days, what was happening was that people were like, we will replace our RPA processes with LLMs. And I think I hope that dies out quickly, because that's not the way it's. LLMs are going to bring in new skills and new ways of doing it, which will augment existing RPA workflows. So if you so and also RPA workflows that have been fine tuned over time, or like the structures of the workflows have been set in place. There's an expectation as well that that's encoded into any workflow that's automated. If you make that probabilistic overnight, that's very hard for it. Usually leads to disappointment. So over time, I think the industry is now transitioning, or there's a better understanding for what should be left to traditional automation and what are the new things we can add to the stack using LLM. I mean, it's kind of you can think of it as having a new tool, and it's like it can do planning, it can do, I mean, and of course I am biased, so I think it like can do simulation really well, and that's something that everyone should leverage. But yeah, it's like that there are new skills that the LLM has added to toolbox, and that is how I look at it. There's another. It's not just a night. It's not. I'm not. I don't want to preach this as a virtue. Like it's not like you need to change. But the hard fact of the matter is that the unit cost of LLM is not the same as of code. So automation is kind of can be cheap, or the unit cost can be very, I mean, low. But for every call that you make to an LLM, there's a non-trivial LLM cost. So the scenario is that your transaction cost is fixed, but the outcome is stochastic. So it may or may not work for you. So I don't, it's not, so you do have to deal with that. Otherwise, your business won't be sustainable, right? Like eventually, for the economics to work, you have to have a handle on how often does it work, in what aspects is it actually delivering advantage such that I'm ready to eat the cost of like non-zero LLM or tool call. So that's, I think it's required for anybody to build like a sustainable product or business on top of LLMs.
So, actually, if we break this down, so if the problem is a very deterministic problem where we don't need intelligence either at the input or the output or during the process, it's just better to stick with simple automation. So when I see a lot of MCP layer built on traditional tools where we're just doing a password reset, other than LLM translating the call, it's there is no need for LLM to make that call. You're as good as just making the call, right? So there are a lot of these one-step process or two-step process. I mean, whether RPA does it well or not, should we replace it? The cost to justify it, to change it is not there. So if we look at, let's say one problem, right? Like where RPA took over all the other platforms is browser automation, right? RPA is heavily used for computer use and browser automation, which we believe, at least I believe, can be done much, much better with LLMs because RPAs are notoriously bad on breaking things because these are continuously changing environment. But there is some cost to attach, and LLMs dealing with browsers I've dealt with for very very long time. It's really really hard, right? So in your world, actually, I mean, you have a lot more experience deploying this in enterprise. Where would you put browser automation problem? Where it requires determinism, it requires intelligence.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. The way I think of it is, yeah, you have to basically segment your problem. So there are problems. For example, one big problem that we discussed a lot was like access control, right? So traditionally, like, so that's not browser specific to your question, but but it's the same analogous thing, like that okay, we had role based access which had like rules that you could hard code in, but then the reality was that it was too brittle, it would fail, and it required a lot of like maintenance, manual setting of all these rules. And that's something that now is ripe for an upgrade, because now based on the content and based on the user profile, the LLM can sort of make a judgment about whether this person should have access to this document or not. Yeah, so we actually experimented a bit with this for solutions around this, and the call, and again the same issue came up actually, because the old rules when they were set up right for many people were like so low cost and it worked really well. Nobody actually wanted to transition to an LLM based access or a smarter access based situation. We had to sort of prove that this will improve, like, 10% of those cases which you were missing today, and where the access was unnecessarily being denied to someone. So now the person or the product who will invest in that solution is someone for whom who's losing customers because of access. So you have to find that niche, that person for whom that value addition is that much necessary for their business. So browser automation, as you said, like, yeah, it's complicated. I think browsers get updated, but then you have to find that person for whom that improvement of like 20% makes that much difference to their business, and then that is the person who would care about these improvements. I've also tried to use computer use, but then we didn't find it reliable enough, and we went back to processing data object models and working off of that. And today big labs, it's a big, like, most of, from my understanding, most of the big contracts that all the data processing companies are getting today, like Merck or Handshake, all of them, they are the big data contracts are for people to create computer use traces. So even the biggest of labs are worried, or they are now focusing on this problem because it's not there yet. But since they have the capital, I think they will be able to make a meaningful difference in the model, and then the smaller companies can sort of take it up and build useful applications on top of it, which give that last, I think, like, yeah, which move the industry forward than where it is today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting problem how to think about determinism and intelligence, and I think touching on the similar topic, when we come to intelligence, you wrote a very interesting blog article talking about how to do verifications in the data centers and hardware. It's really, really important. There's a huge sort of limitations what can be inputted, and outputs are incredibly more important. And when we are talking in power plants, electricity, and it also makes a lot of sense to use machine learning to build adaptive systems because you can save a lot of money. So could you just share a little bit more about the blog, Akshay, and how do you think about it?
So I chose those examples because I don't think enough people know that, like, in those cases, as you said, the impact is very real. It's actually a real hardware object in the world, and it is being controlled by an AI system, a model, which the engineers don't fully understand. They don't understand why the model is choosing the parameters, or it's making that change in the coil, or that change in the physical parameter. And I wanted to point out that, similar to, like, if anybody who's listening to this ever gets to sit in a self-driving car, like, it's the same thing there. It's a real physical moving object that will take you from place A to place B. And yeah, so all of those systems heavily rely on simulation and verification. What the smartest people in those companies or behind those systems are doing is making good verification systems, so that they can trust the network, which they may not fully understand, like, why that network is making the decision it is. But because they have invested in such good verification systems, they are sure that we verified it, and we have enough of bounds. I don't want to say, like, the whole deal here is being probabilistic. So it's like if the system is staying within this range of operation, I'm good and I can release it in the real world. There's still no deterministic threshold there. It's not like they can say it is going to produce 15% gain. What they will say is that it will produce 10 to 20% at this expense, and that is something I am okay with. I'm okay with it doing 10%. I'm okay, of course, if it's 20%, it's a win. If I'm talking about efficiency. And I think that is the way even software industry will have to learn to operate. We will have to start thinking in terms of ranges, that okay, if my model performs, like if the RPA, or I mean not RPA, let's say if the agent that I built does well on this particular use case 80% of the time, am I okay with 100 call 20 of my LLM calls going waste and paying that extra token cost? That's the question that now we need to start answering, and we need to start thinking in those terms.
It's a very interesting point, Akshay. I had this question ready for you, and I think you used a self-driving car example, which, so I was going to ask you that, hey, you used examples of hardware where the outputs are controlled, so we can have some verification, but in software, the inputs and output can vary so much that it's very, very hard to verify every possible combination. But then you already answered by giving an example of self-driving, where, I mean, the inputs and the outputs are almost unlimited. So it makes a lot of sense. And like the analogy that you're giving around that, thinking about outcomes, like if it's wrong 10% of the time or 15% of the time, it's okay because my ROI on the 80% is so much more, then it doesn't really matter. And that framework makes a lot of sense. It's basically saying that as humans, we are productive 100% of our working hours, right? And even when we are working, our productivity levels are consistent. So how do we even measure that? We really can't. We just agreed to some baseline of what general people work on or what our expectations is. And beyond that, we are okay. Some person can do it in 1 hour. Some people may take 8 hours. Yeah, that's a really, really good analogy, and I think I may use that in my calls later on.
Yeah, that's
That's a very
great.
good one.
Yeah, and it's great that you get, because I'm also doing obviously a lot of customer calls these days. I'm trying to explain that this is how you should think about evaluation. It's not going to be 100%. Not every prompt that you write is going to. It's like I read this term which was put out by this person who worked both at Replit and Anthropic, and it was like you have to define minimum viable intelligence. If I want something intelligent to work for me, the idea is that it's not going to be 100% right, but if 80% of the time it can automate something that, yeah, that used to take like x k dollars in the past, and now it can be done in like $100, then I think we have a winning use case. And and you should be then, yeah, you define your minimum viable intelligence. Or another way to think of it is, what's my risk appetite here? Like, those are the kind of.
With certain problems, it's okay, because if I was sitting on the computer completely and some agents does it in 4 tries, why do I care? That's a really, really great way to think about it. Actually, you should write a blog post on this. It's a very good term. If I copy it, don't be surprised, because it's a really good framework to think and actually talk to enterprises who are not thinking in terms of AI, because everybody seeks perfection. It's basically expecting that humans would behave 100% at the same times. Even intelligent beings, humans, we are not consistent.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
why have that expectation? And I think it's just like the cost function should come out, and the reducing of the risk function, that you don't make a mistake. If the cost is failure, which means just additional dollars, not like a damage to the process. Yeah, that's a great way to think about this. So I'm curious, Aksha, as you talk to your customers, the first thing they will say, Aksha, why should I spend on verification? And the analogy, if I'm one of your customers, it's like, Aksha, we build software, we can do so much QA, and some bugs are never discovered for 5 years. So I can spend a lot of time doing QA now, or it may or may not be an issue ever. I don't know if you've heard it, so I'm very curious if you heard that argument yet. If you hear that argument, how would you think about that? So basically, I'm using a testing thing. So, like, if we come to the agent world, right, it works, fine 6 out of 10 times in my environment. Like, do I really need to do the verification and put my investment resources, whether I buy Kashikoy or I do my own stuff? I can let B go in the wild, let my customers use it, and whatever they tell me is off, only then I come and fix it. Right? And I'm talking specifically in world of software, not in self-driving cars. Does this argument make sense?
Say we run with this example, right? 6 out of 10. Which means 4 out of 10 of my LLM calls are failing. So there are two costs that I see. Is this the way I ask people? Is that, are you sure this is the contract that your customer is okay with? That 4 out of 10. So 4 times they punch in something into your AI system and they don't get the output they want. Are you sure that this contract is fine? I'm not entirely sure, because people have far less loyalty with AI systems. Like, if we all do that, we switch from Claude to GPT to Gemini, like in our tabs. So that is one thing. But say you're sure about that. I think over time, it's like, if I have a system and a workflow that I figured out and people are paying me for it, even if it fails 4 out of 10 times, I think my view is the pressure of business will force you to find a more efficient way to do it. So either you are like, okay, I'm good with 4 on 10 failures, but I have to find a cheaper way. So the four LLM calls that I'm losing, either I start losing less per token on those calls, which means that I should build a smaller model. I should reduce my hosting expenses, AWS bill, whatever it is, or Azure bills. So I think that pressure will start coming at you. So that's number two. And number three, yeah, currently, of course, which is not sustainable, but we do live in warp times where 4 on 10, like, there's a new model that comes out every 6 months, which means that you need to rebuild the whole process. So even if you were okay with like 6 on 10 failures, now there's a whole new use case that has come out. And if you don't have verification, or if you don't have a clear view of what it is what business objective you're optimizing for, like, yeah, that it will become very difficult to adapt or build a new system.
Actually, if I was just saying and I don't want to pay you, I was like, hey, actually, 6 out of 10 is my minimal viable intelligence, and I'm okay with it. So then, where would this verification become more important in sort of mission critical enterprises versus somebody? I'm not going to use this example because I don't know people in certain AI, okay, I'll use this, like AI SDRs, like you wrote a bad email, it's like it doesn't matter as much. So does this become more problem specific where verification is a must? And then even 2 out of 10 errors are not okay. And if they are, we need to know what is the level of that error that we can actually live with.
I don't think you need to be building a mission critical software. The idea is that, as you said, if I wrote a bad cold email, what is the impact? And that's bit like, of course, it's not mission, like nobody's gonna die or have, because somebody wrote a bad email, but there's a drop off. Somebody is going to stop paying attention to you. It might get annoying. So, and this is not even AI stuff. Like, this is traditional sales SDR effectiveness, right? Like, what is the and people, like, there are measures for this, right? Drop off, or like email open counts, all of those things. So I think, you still need to measure that risk of, like, okay, if my email was bad, now what is the impact of that on my email open rate? Or, like, so I think measurement is still needed. That's a fundamental truth of business. So that's why you need verification. And I think that it doesn't have to be mission critical. And in reality today, like, I'll just share this funny thing, but what is happening is that we tell this to people as you, yeah, very valid response. They are like, I don't care, it's all working. And anyway, like we've also heard things like OpenAI or somebody will come with a new model. So I'm just going to switch to that. But what's happening is that they come back in like 3 months or 6 months. There's a whole new family of models out there, and if they don't do it, some young startup is actually coming for their business with like the newer models, because their technology stack started like 6 months ago. So they are more AI native. So all of those business pressures do exist, and people do come back to us also, like after 6 months. So that's the reality. Like it first time, it's, yeah, or I think a year ago it was even more common for people to laugh and be like, this is not required. There's going to be a new model tomorrow and it's going to solve all my problems. I also used to find it weird if someone said that, because I would be like, then why do you exist, right? Like that should not be a reason to be happy. That should worry you.
Yes, like new model will come and it will work for me and I don't have to do anything, Akshay. That would be really nice. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I'm curious. So where does the burden lie for verification systems, Akshay, right? So is it, do you think, is it solely lie with MoveWorks? Is it the enterprise who use MoveWorks? And this is sort of way of asking who's sort of ideal customer for Kashikoi?
What I've seen so far is that what is happening in industry right now is that the burden of verification is on the seller. So there are a lot of AI companies like me selling different, not, but like, a lot of AI first companies, and then they have to show their ROI versus incumbents. So they are themselves offering verification. I think it should lie with the customer, and this is what I really want, that every non-technical person, every decision maker, honestly, anyone who actually cares about building a useful thing, that and they see joy in somebody else using what they built, whether technical or not, I feel that person should have the ability to verify as well, because they've, yeah, that's kind of my vision. But if we talk at enterprise level, I do think that the people who are buying these AI products, what I really want is to enable them to build verification systems, because they are the people who think about ROI more. They are at least closer to the business process they want to build, or buy an AI product for, and so they should have more of a say in like what is the criteria for evaluating something. Today what's happening in industry is that new models come, there are benchmarks which basically are created by PhD students, on grants from the government, and who are doing it out of their blood, sweat, tears. I was in a research at CMU. I was in a research master's. I myself have manually created data sets because that's what we needed to do at the time. And those are the kinds of benchmarks on which the whole industry is moving. And the funny thing is that you have all these announcements, you see the blogs, but then if you go to Reddit, there's a completely parallel universe running where everybody is extremely opinionated about like, no, Gemini is better for my coding use case versus Claude Code. So there's a whole different world where people are, and we're all exchanging notes, and that's affecting our decisions. And so what I really hope is that the customers, and it can be like anybody, like even I am a customer of AI products today, and I want any and everybody to be able to create a benchmark of their very own personal sense of like what is the right way, or what is it that I want AI to do for me.
There is probably some website where if there is a use case, I should be quickly able to create a benchmark, like reverse RPA almost of testing. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. And it would make sense because there's a very clear expectation on what I know. And then you can evaluate vendors. It's like, hey, do you come in my parameters? It's a very, very interesting concept. Akshay and I would love to talk about it offline. I'm just being mindful of time. It's like, do they have the expertise? And I think that's where things start falling off. Like, it's so hard to hire AI talent at the moment. And do we feel that enterprises are equipped? I mean, so many AI startups don't have decent AI talent, and now, and now I mean, conceptually, what you're saying makes sense. Is that practical reality? I think I would love to discuss, in person, or maybe a topic for another of one of our recordings. So, shifting gears to rapid fire questions, and I kept this hidden, Naksha, so I want like genuine responses. So, favorite book this year?
Favorite book this year, The Wealth Ladder by Nick Maggiulli. It's a very sort of data driven and practical way to think about your wealth and your relationship. Yeah, and it's a little more, how do I say, more numbers and data driven than Psychology of Money, which is way more famous. So I thought it gave me a a practical way to think about like what's my relationship with money and wealth.
I will check it out. Okay, so this is a controversial question, and you have to be as opinionated as possible. Most overrated tech trend right now?
I think replacing humans, yeah, that does not. I don't believe that's going to last for long.
So, could you share more light? What do you mean by that?
I've heard of these like companies which did layoffs last year, or and then they, because they were like, we're, even before they had their AI stack ready, they had done layoffs, and a year and a half later they are back to so-called hiring for those positions. This is a symptom of what I was trying to say, that like you're firing all these people who could actually leverage AI to sort of bring more efficiencies into the business. Human is a source of cost in any organization, so I can understand, but that's one aspect of efficiency. There are many others. So yeah, I think that whole thinking just does not make sense to me.
I think my thoughts on that one. I think all the companies who set up like, oh, they're implementing AI are so old school dinosaurs. They are basically they have to show that they have AI. And interestingly, at Booster, the startup I founded, was we implemented a lot of AI for internal process automation, and we never let a single person go. And I think, but over time, we didn't have to hire as much. And I think where startups, I feel, and people think, oh, how would you reduce cost? And I think in short term, there is not going to be cost reduction. It's going to be net new increase of cost with the AI product. It's what the way people should think about it. It's like, what would be the real productivity gains? Because you don't want to disrupt what you have, especially, you've worked in enterprise, and I've worked with enterprise customers, and I've worked at Cisco. So I've worked in enterprise. There's no room for disruption. And you just can't say, like, oh, I'm going to put AI and remove people. That's just not going to happen. It's just like, how much more can you serve over time? And that's the concept. So I fully agree. And all the companies is like, oh, I'm putting AI. It's like, I know how much AI you have. It's the last one, ending on a happy note. What is your favorite Christmas time movie?
Favorite Christmas time movie is Devil Wears Prada. I love
Yeah,
that
interesting.
movie.
Good to know. Good to know. Akshay, thank you so much. This was a blast. I really enjoyed chatting with you. I think there's just so many things which could lead to like many episodes. I hope you enjoy your trip in India, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much as well. This was a lot of fun. And I was just thinking the irony, like we're recording this cross continent where when we are actually literally neighbors. So
Yeah, literally
it's like,
what, 20 feet of vertical distance.
yeah, exactly. But like, yeah, it's just crazy. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you as well for adding your comments from your long experience. It was really
Yeah.
nice. Fun
Thanks,
chat.
Akshay.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks. Bye.